Well, this is it. This is the first time. Carrie, we're going to try a whole new format today. Oh, where's my head?
I don't know. It disappeared. I guess it's just me.
Yep, it's just you. It's your show today. We're going to try a whole new format today. We have two guests today for the first time ever. We have Katie Robbert from Trust Insights. We have Jantsch from Duct Marketing. We have things. Also, we have an intro. Backpack. Well, so welcome to yet another episode of The Backpack. I am so glad to have you here. I'm Chris Brogan, my co-host, Carrie Gorgon.
Hello.
I could still do it. Hello. How the heck's everybody? Good to see everybody. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for enduring the week of reruns. I know that nobody showed up for any of the rerun episodes, but if you were here, you would have seen all kinds of things because there were reruns.
It's so typical. Let's take a week and like really work on the show. We just won't run the show. We're just going to work on it and then a show like every day.
It's like it's really at this point it's kind of like Brokeback. I can't quit you. I needed to be here. I needed to talk to people. So you do many things, which has been quite made aware to a lot of people because you work at Marketing Profs. You run the Marketing Smarts podcast. You help them with all their design for some of their new and existing courses, webinars, and everything. You also have a project that you launched with a partner called Punch Out with Katie and Carrie. Can you talk just a tiny little bit about what that was and why did you bring in a show like this and why Katie Robbert?
Oh my God, because she's so funny. You'll see it. So I met Katie and just like instantly loved her. And I don't like anybody. On first meeting, I don't like anybody. And I just loved her. Like we laughed it was at the B2B marketing forum, which as you can imagine is a laugh riot. No, seriously, it's very fun. But I met Katie and we had the best time. And so I want to say it was like 2 months after that, we went out for breakfast, which again, I saw her again. This is like unprecedented that I meet somebody and like them so much I actually go out of my way to see them again, like pretty soon after. So we had breakfast and I was telling her, what I want to do is like this different podcast where we don't talk about any work stuff like at all. I talk to all the same people that I talk to for Marketing Profs, but we don't talk about work at all, just fun stuff. So it's like the muffin top of podcasts. And she's like, I want in.
By the way, the muffin top of podcast is the best descriptor of a podcast ever in the history of podcast.
I mean, it could be bad. Some people consider muffin tops like the little chub that you get over your jeans, but I'm thinking of it like the best part of the muffin, not the stump, but the top. So, because I always love those little moments in regular podcasts where people just like slip in something personal around their analytics talk or whatever. And you're like, oh my God, this is so interesting. And I wanted more of that. And so when Katie was like, I want in, all of a sudden it just clicked. I was like, yes, I can see it. And man, it is just so much fun working with Katie. She's so bright and so organized. And she, I'm like the plucky comic relief, but she goes up a level and sees the patterns in what like the hobbies people choose and makes these really astute observations. She's really smart. And she's just the best. I love her. So that's what we're doing is trying to prove to people that their off hours are as important as their on hours.
Katie, would you say that that's because you want to deliver more insights into the people that you talk to on Punch Out?
I see what you did there, and definitely I do. You know what it is? So when I started college, I actually thought I was going to major in psychology because I really love understanding how people think, how they tick, and just really digging into what like their life is comprised of and their hobbies and those. So when Carrie mentioned the idea, I just sort of hijacked it. I said, I want in on this because I love trying to, unpack people's brains and sort of like how they became to be and where they are. And so it's such a fun, show that we do that it really helps us get to know people that we wouldn't otherwise get a chance to really talk to. And Chris, you were on I think the first season, and we really got to talk with you about a lot of the things that you do outside of what it is that you do professionally. And I think that that's such an important part of, getting to know people professionally is what do they do outside of that? Because we're humans, we're well-rounded, and, doing work 24/7 is the fastest path to burnout. And we have to have that balance. And so really just encouraging people to see that the smartest, most talented marketers that also have lives outside of it. So you should too.
Totally.
It's healthy.
I love that Chris was like, I have tons of secondary interests. I need some primary interests.
I need to be interesting. I don't know. Carrie, I don't know what happened. I was messing with my camera because I looked like,
now I'm first.
And now you're first. So.
My show.
I still have a tiny head.
Well, you look like you're at the kids' table. That's why Carrie was asking you, can you muck that
forward.
around?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always stuck at the kids' table. I'm kind of used to it.
You're
fine.
6 feet tall. Katie, you guys can't see this. Katie's very tall. She's like very intimidating and she's very smart. And she just kind of like, she looks mean, but she's not mean.
Well, a little mean. I'm a little mean.
All right. She's from Boston. So all three of us from Massachusetts, we have like barbs.
Where do we drag in Jantsch? Because it is, he is purely the Midwest. So it'll be the nicest guy ever by the time he shows up.
So nice.
Katie, I don't think, is this your first podcast? This is your first, well, sorry, you do the Trust Insights podcast. Is this your first time in this world of podcasting just since this new gig?
In terms of being a guest on someone else's podcast?
No, as a host. Were you running a lot of podcasts before you did Trust Insights and Punch Out?
I wasn't. I never really had the opportunity. But when I was in high school, I had a radio show on the local radio station, WRPS, which I had to learn to say properly with my Boston accent, which was a challenge because everyone else said WRPS, and the station manager was just forever angry at all of us. And then in college, I also had a radio show. So I'm familiar with the format. I always really enjoyed it, but I never in my other professional jobs had an opportunity to do it. I came from an academic world. And at the time in the early 2000s, that world, there really wasn't a space for podcasting. There really wasn't a built-in audience. And then I moved on to more of traditional marketing and PR. And so then I started to get reintroduced to it. And then when Chris Penn and I started Trust Insights, he's obviously big in the podcasting space with Marketing Over Coffee with John Wall. And so we decided that it was a great opportunity to start our own thing for Trust Insights, which is the in-ear insights. And then I have the secondary show with Carrie, which is Punch Out, which is a lot of fun.
But you like it better. So, I mean, you call it secondary, I know, but it's more fun.
If it starts to pay my bills more than my business, then I would call it my primary podcast.
Okay. But it's your favorite. It can be your favorite.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's fine if it's your favorite. Katie, talk to us a little bit about this grown-up job you seem to have called Trust Insights. What's that all about, and why should people know about it?
And what's it like being Chris Penn's boss?
I'm always tired. So Trust Insights, we are a marketing analytics consultancy, which at a very small level means that we work with companies and clients to get their data sorted out. And so if you have a lot of different systems that you're collecting data from, then we're the ones who will come in and help you understand where the data is going, where, what data you should be collecting, and then connect all of those systems together. And then we also use a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning to automate a lot of your reporting. So we take away a lot of those mundane and repetitive tasks for our clients so that they can focus on more important things, such as reconnecting with their customers and making sure that they're pulling out those smart insights and then using the data to plan ahead so that they're not constantly feeling like they're behind the 8 ball, so that they can really sort of move forward and make their marketing smarter. So we operate in that supporting role to marketers to help elevate marketers do their jobs better.
Katie, one of the things I've learned about data in just the last handful of years is that companies think they need data or that they need to be doing stuff with big data, and they don't have the first clue what they're saying when they ask it. It's just they saw it in an ad somewhere. How does that first conversation go when you start to, and what's the difference between when you have that conversation and when Penn does, because when you clean their head off the wall, then what is it like? What's the difference between those two scenarios?
So Chris usually lets me have that conversation so that we don't scare them away. Now, here's the thing. Chris Penn is incredibly intelligent, and a lot of the times we get hired because people want to work with the illustrious Chris Penn, which is great, but there needs to be sort of that middle person to translate what he's saying they need and what, the questions they're asking. And that's a lot of the role that I play in those conversations. And so the first question that I will ask somebody is, what is the question that you're trying to answer? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? And 9 times out of 10, they're not even sure what that is. And that's where we start. And so we do a lot of planning and KPI mapping. And my strength is really in more of those upfront organizational process pieces. So I help sort of straighten out the process. I help straighten out the team. I help straighten out, here's the data that you should be collecting. And then Chris can come in and, dig into the systems, make sure everything is set up with best practices, and then make sure that the data is being collected in a clean and consistent manner so that there's data integrity, and then that you can have confidence in the reports that they're pulling.
Katie's the people person.
I'm the people person. And you can probably see my giant dog moving around next to me. That's the black mass behind me.
Katie, related to that and data, is there kind of a starter pack, so to speak, depending on the business or industry, that's like, well, you need to have this before you really do anything? Like, is there like a top 5 or something?
Yeah, we definitely have. We have starter packs, but in general, we like to talk with people for whatever they're doing, that your infrastructure, your foundation is the most important thing. So if you don't have that squared away, then collecting data is going to be a waste of your time. And so we like to make sure that people have their infrastructure set up. And that a lot of times comes down to making sure that you have, a website that has some sort of a call to action on it, and that you have something like Google Analytics set up so that you're collecting data about what's happening on your website, what your customers are doing. A lot of people start with social media, which is useful if that's where your audience lives. But also, if you can't tie that social media back to what's happening on your website or how you're driving sales, then you're still missing that connector piece. And again, that usually comes down to Google Analytics. A lot of companies use Adobe Omniture. Really, you just need to be able to see what's happening on your website in a digital space.
Carrie, any questions?
Well, our next guest, Jantsch, talks a lot about tips for small businesses and entrepreneurs. What I'm hearing when you're talking is, that sounds expensive. Like all this stuff with machine learning and AI sounds really expensive. So what can Trust Insights do for people who are with smaller businesses? Like, sounds like there's some things that they could do to make better use of the data they have and maybe collect, the right data.
So it doesn't need to be expensive. We have smaller $500 consultations that will go through your Google Analytics setup and go through an 11-point checklist and just sort of help you understand how things are set up. And based on what we find, we'll let you know, well, this is how your system is set up. And so you can move on to more advanced machine learning reports like a digital customer journey attribution analysis, or based on what we're seeing, we might need to do a full audit and see what other systems you're working with. And so we really try to introduce people in a very small way. We don't immediately toss all of the artificial intelligence at them. A lot of people don't need it. And it isn't the right solution. We actually chatted about this morning as we were recording the In-Ear Insights podcast, that the investment in artificial intelligence, it might not be the right thing for you, because if you can't sustain it, if you don't have the right resources, if you don't have the right infrastructure, it might not be something that saves you time and money. So it might not be something that you should bother with. And that's okay. Not everybody needs artificial intelligence in order to run a successful business.
They just need regular intelligence.
Well, yeah.
Just get some of that regular old intelligence. You can get a lot more Katie Robbert on her Twitter, Katie Robbert. Note the double B because you will mess that up. You can also get to trustinsights.ai, which is an important place to go and learn and get some new things. You probably don't need this yet, but you might someday in the near future. Who knows? So, Katie, really glad to have you on. Thanks for being part of this, and thanks for dealing with that one over there.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I love Carrie. She's one of my favorite people in the whole world. So
Yay.
If you're not nice to her, me and my 6 feet will come find you.
Chris is unfailingly nice to me.
Nearly lovable. That's what I like to say about Carrie. All right. Good seeing you, Katie. Thanks so much for being part of it.
Thank you.
All right. So like I said, we're trying out a whole new format. So there you are. Who knows how this is going to go? I'm over here usually. But we're going to drag in John Jantsch.
Everything.
Katie Robbert is part of Trust Insights. We may or may not drag her back at the beginning, but at the beginning,
At the end. You're going to do the
Watching a
whole thing
series about
backwards.
time travel right
This is
now
like the
called
Benjamin
Dark.
Button episode.
This is terrible. It's going to just go bad from here. It's just nothing's going to work right.
No, I love this actually. These two really go well together because what Katie does with Trust Insights can work equally as well for a small business as for a large business. And John has so many amazing tips for entrepreneurs and startups. I think they go well together.
Oh, I just also noticed that when I did my refresh that I wrecked my screen share. So I'm going to, just talk over myself for no good reason other than the fact that I wrecked it. But I wanted to go to a couple little articles that I found might be interesting is relating to backpack. Backpack's all about what goes in your backpack, what's important. Why are we doing that? Why did I forget to put my logo in the corner? But what it goes into is the whole idea of, we should do things that are going to help your day and help you figure out how you're going to work in your business. And so one of the things I was reading was an interesting little article from Harvard Business Review. It was talking about, does your company have a plan for remote work and a long-term plan at that? We're kind of all just dealing with it and winging it right now, but that's not really necessarily going to be, useful after, even though it's just been a few months. One of the things this article shows, by the way, is some storylines about what Facebook and Twitter have talked about and what they're going to do. There's some more thoughts about what, Apple just built this massive headquarters. What are they going to do? And then there's a bunch of other questions about it too. What are we going to do about salary adjustments? What are we going to do about resources? How is the IT department doing what you're doing? And in fact, I was starting to think about the fact of, I'm a big fan of office supplies. Who isn't? I mean, Dan Pink went nutty about office supplies. We're going to be in this situation where all of a sudden,
you have to buy your own Post-its.
Yeah, I was just thinking that we're going to run out of Post-its. So I feel like any time now we're just going to, realize that this isn't just a few months kind of a scenario, and that's going to change the way we look at things.
I'm excited to get my own office supplies. I ordered a box of purple pens when I was a managing editor for a magazine because I felt like red was judgmental. And my boss was like, oh, somebody accidentally ordered all these purple pens. I'm like, did they? I will take them.
So weird. How on the earth did that ever come about?
I don't know.
So another article I thought you might find interesting was called The Great College Depression. And we don't have to go into it, especially too high, but this is a Forbes article talking about the fact that there's a whole bunch of universities all over the United States and possibly the rest of the world, but most definitely the US, saying that there are massive losses of students, of course.
Well, this just forced the issue, like the same way the pandemic has forced a lot of other things to the forefront that might have taken another decade to surface fully. I mean, they were already on the decline. People were already like, what's college even doing for me?
Yeah, attendance was low to begin with, like you're saying. And then it just goes a little bit further to point out the fact that, the whole work from home, study from home has changed what people are going to take about their valuation. And is it worth it to be there? Is if there's no campus life, what are you going to do about campus life, right? So that's a question as well. I have one last article, and then we're going to go back to, and we're going to bring in John. And so that one's about Delta saying to its pilots, hey, you know what? If you don't mind, just take a 15% pay loss, and we'll let you keep your job. Thanks, New York Times. Like all your ads. Delta is saying that, it's not going to furlough people if they'll take a cut in pay. So no matter what, just boot it on out of there. Are you going to see that in a lot of other businesses, do you think, Carrie?
Yes and no. Everything is a little bit different than it used to be, I feel like. And like you were saying, just when you showed the first article, people are kind of like waiting for things to go back to normal, and they're not going to. So everything has changed, I think, permanently, and we just have to wait and see like to what degree. Oh, but John says he wouldn't want to be in commercial real estate, which I think is that's solid advice. Don't get into it now. Don't be like, it's all so cheap now, I'll buy it all now. That I don't. Yeah.
Well, I just saw recently that, and I didn't put up an article for this, but there's a hotel in Brooklyn that converted most of its beds into office spaces. So they're going to do $200 a day office spaces. So WeWork, Breather, some of our friends, they're all going to bounce into this as well.
Well, how equipped are they going to be, though? Like, I remember I went to a conference once, and you know how they'll sometimes set aside areas for doing interviews? They were doing a documentary on content marketing. I know it's as exciting as it sounds, but they were filming it in hotel rooms. And I was like, this looks very sketchy.
Oh, my gosh.
Everything that normally is in a hotel room was in there. Plus, they just had like this like area with lights and an extra like chair and stuff. And I don't know about all that. So I think they'll have to do a little more work to convert it to make it feel like an office.
That reminds me of one of my favorite ever stories from Luria Petrucci. I don't know if you know Luria. She's been a longtime video person. She used to have a different name on camera, but the name was actually like a fake name used for the camera stuff and is trademarked. So, morning, Vince. And Luria one day finds me in a hallway at one of the earliest Blog World Expos, runs right up to me and says, "Will you do an interview with me?" And I said, "Absolutely." She goes, "Here's the weird part. It's back in my hotel room in my bed." I said, "Yes, let's go." And so we went as fast as we could. And then I met her husband. And then I said, "Okay, weird, but still, and I would say that the opportunity to do the interview was she was doing this series called In Bed. That's the number one weird story of interviews in places that you don't expect them to be. But
I've been offered that interview on that show so many times and by different hosts. And I'm like, how is this possible? This makes no sense. And there's no camera.
In bed.
Invisible camera.
I think have a great podcast in bed if he wanted to offer something like that. John Jantsch, Mr. Duct Tape Marketing himself.
You caught me right in the middle of a disapproving look. Sorry.
That's even better. Just because you didn't get asked for that one. But,
How do you know he didn't?
Yeah.
He's probably smart enough to have said no.
Red on, by the way.
I said yes a bunch of times, and now I'm like, these interviews never air. It's a waste of time.
What the heck happened? John, you, amongst other things, you're world famous for duct tape marketing. You're world famous for having that book for a gazillion years, but also very recently published The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur, which is a daily book where you can come and read every single day. And we thought, gee, it would be great to hear about today's July 20th lesson. So we thought maybe we'd give you a little Patrick Stewart moment here, and you could read your your sonnet.
You know how like the author like reading things you see in the movie, at the little cozy bookstore with hundreds of people around, reading a little passage from the book. I've always wanted to have a book like that, but like marketing books, nobody really wants that for. So I will. Maybe I need to set it up a little bit if you'll give me just a little bit of time here. So it is a daily. So every day, today's July 20th while we're on the show. So there is an entry for July 20th. But every day starts with a reading from some mid-19th century literature that I think is some of the best. It's a very narrow band of literature that I think is some of the best entrepreneurial writing still today. Then I give 150, 200 words of context, and then I leave you with a question every day that hopefully challenges you a little bit to think about what your self-development path for that day is going to be. So here is the reading from today. July 20, your best work. All I can say is that it is an honest book, a sincere book, and contains my best thoughts on subjects treated. If well received, I shall be grateful. If neglected, I shall endeavor to practice resignation as I have so often. That's from Orestes Bronson, The American Republic, from 1865. In my words.
You're muted.
Did I get muted?
No, not you, Chris.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're great.
Talking to myself. I hit mute because I don't know. I'll take a bite of this tomato or something. Who knows?
That's the whole reason I'm here, John.
All right. So here's the context for me, supposedly. Can you say this about your work? That it's honest and sincere and that it contains your best thoughts. That's all we have to do. And then we have to release it and sleep well. Bronson was referring to his written works. But it's no stretch to see yourself adopting this point of view. But if your first attempt is not well received, you're not allowed to practice resignation. In fact, resignation can go pound sand. So why include this reading? Maybe we need an occasional reminder that there will be times when you think you've done your best, but the world greets it with a collective who cares. That's not the time to sulk, to mutter under your breath. No, that's the time to get up and figure it out. Run around the block screaming if you like, but then come back and look at your challenge with a fresh point of view. Do that, and then, like Thoreau, you can exclaim, I did not wish to live what was not life. Life is so dear, nor did I wish to practice resignation, unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put the rout to all that was not life. Today, you get to make resignation quite unnecessary, unless, of course, it's resignation from that job you hate. Then do it. Your challenge question today: in what areas of your life are you not applying the best of you?
Knowing when to hit the mute button, obviously.
I don't know. You had that down. Knowing when to unmute. That's the problem.
I can mute like the best of them. I'm clearly Canadian. Sorry. John,
the lawyer in me thinks it's so smart that you picked all these older pieces that are not subject to copyright protection any longer. I was like, yes, John.
Yes,
Way to go.
They are public domain works, but if you think about what was going on 150 years ago in America, at least, we were on the cusp of the Civil War. Women were finally marching in the streets to attempt to get the right to vote. We were trying to abolish the legal act of human slavery. And it was the first sort of counterculture period in America where people were rising up and saying, you know what? Maybe we don't have to listen to those that came before us. Maybe we don't have to follow our parents or our politicians, our teachers, whatever. Maybe we actually need to think for ourselves and do and follow what's in our heart. And so, folks like Emerson and Thoreau and Louisa May Alcott and Margaret Fuller, we're really some of the first people to write that. And I think what's so awesome is it's probably even more relevant today than in many ways than it was a year and a half ago when I wrote it. But I still find it just terribly useful for entrepreneurs.
John, you just led to it. The point is that the book is based on stuff from the 1800s, but is applying almost daily to the real thing out in the street right now. It's interesting to hit that just so, and I'm sure others have commented about that. Are you, as an author though, are you just a little bit like, oh my gosh, like I didn't expect that. I just wanted this kind of cool daily reader book.
Well, I will say this. I mean, certainly nobody expected where we are on July 20th, 2020. But I will say that this has been brewing for 4 or 5 years, at least, that the divide that I think a lot of us feel and the sort of partisan, rhetoric, I think has really done a little bit of, tearing at the fabric of, who we are as humans. And I've always felt that entrepreneurs are really the sort of the saving grace. I mean, we do a lot of what we do to right some wrong, to bring people together, to correct something or give the world something that will make their lives easier. And so I quite often thought in terms of, gosh, a world full of self-reliant entrepreneurs might actually be the answer to bring us all back together.
I can see that too. Related to that as well, do you find that, well, what I was thinking was, so the first book, Duct Tape Marketing, if there wasn't that book, there wouldn't be any of this, right? Like your site, the everything. I mean, it is still such a rock solid brand. There's no dent in that. But it must be after this many years, you're like, oh, let's stop talking about marketing. Here I get to write this other book. Your heart is all over this book. What's that like? And then what's it like looping it back into that other stuff so that people feel like it, there's some connection and resilience to it?
Yeah, and in some ways, I wrote this book for myself. I mean, this is a daily practice, is something I've done for 30 years, and entrepreneurship is probably the greatest self-development program ever created. And so I feel a lot of times like that's what I've been on. I've been on a journey of self-development for 30 years. So this book in some ways was a culmination of things that I've collected, I guess, over the years. You're absolutely right. I was at a point in my life where I didn't want to write another marketing book. So there is some, I think there is some truth to that. Like, here's a diversion, here's something else I can do. But I also just felt like it was a time for me to put this out there, and hopefully that shed some light and some wisdom. I mean, I've owned my own business for 30 years, and there's at least a few things that I think people can learn from what I've learned, or at least that's the hope. But the sort of ironic thing about writing a book about self-reliance is, the self part is on you. I can't tell you that part. It's really probably, if anything else, it's how can you develop a practice or a habit of looking internally. Build a better you is maybe the way to build a better business.
This book would work for anyone, though, John. I know you have to say entrepreneurs because you can't just say self-reliance for like everyone. But the readings apply equally to everybody who's ever wanted to accomplish like anything ever. Yeah.
So I have some follow-up books. I'm doing the self-reliant, the self-reliant business owner with 3 dogs and a cat is kind of the next first version that's coming out. And, I'm going to niche down to, some pretty safe.
How about 2 giant dogs like Katie Robbert?
No, you're more than one person said that, because, the thing about entrepreneurship, I mean, there's no like, I'm an entrepreneur and then I'm a person and then I go home and I have balance. I mean, there's none of that. We just try to live a fulfilled life. And so many of the things that bring us joy and happiness are what I want to work on in this book, and that's certainly our job for all of us, man, woman, child.
One question I was thinking about while you were saying that was that you and I have had this conversation a couple different ways in the hallways back when there were hallways, and one of the things that I would say is you are working on your spirituality. You're working on all these other elements of being John. You're working on your music. Watching you in places like Instagram is sort of like watching Katie and Carrie's Punch Out show, because I get to see all the other parts of being John. One thing I think about you also is incredibly polite. Certainly not somebody throwing his view around with hammers or whatever. This is a really tough time to navigate and put your feet in the water. What's been the John Jantsch approach to navigating in this water?
Well, I contend that, people keep using these terms like the new normal and when will we go back to normal. And I think a lot of us are forgetting that in some ways nothing's changed. We just got this wake up, this shake up that says, maybe we shouldn't be doing crappy, spammy marketing after all. That's how I feel it. But what we should be doing, all the advice, how to market in a pandemic is just so silly, because it's basically good advice. It's what we should have always been doing. It's what we should always do. So when all the social media platforms came along, I kept saying, nothing's changed. Fundamentally, here's what our job is as an entrepreneur or as a marketer it's to get somebody to trust us enough that see value in what we do so that they solve the problem that they're trying to solve. And I think that it's really easy to get wrapped up in the conditions, in the platforms, and the things that we think have changed how we always did it. But I think if we stay focused on that fundamental truth, all we are is in the new abnormal.
New Abnormal is also the name of my third band. We have a new album coming out sometime soon. Carrie?
Trademark search that before you start doing it.
Oh.
Now let me write that down. Add that to my list of things to do.
Oh, I don't even want to think about that.
John, I don't know how many people who are coming to this new and here, like reading your new book and being introduced to you kind of for the first time, know that duct tape marketing, it's a really cool sort of scrappy analogy for how you get things done, like as a startup, right? Or as a small business.
Yeah, kind of my story was I went out there and started a business 30 years ago, no plan whatsoever, just hustled some work. Somebody said, can you do this? And I said, sure, I can do that. How hard could it be? And, eventually built a client or two, found that I really loved working with small business owners, but they were extremely hard to work with in the manner that I was used to doing. I had worked for an ad agency for about 5 years before this. So working with small business was sort of a foreign thing. As you noted too, they never have the same budget, but a lot of times not even the same attention span, to do the work. And so one day I said, you know what I got to do? I got to start, I got to create an approach where I can walk in and say, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. Here are the results we hope to get. Here's what it costs. You want it or not? And lo and behold, the first 3 people I made some version of that speech to said, where have you been all my life? It's like, in trying to tap into my frustration of working with small business owners, I tapped into what is still today the greatest frustration for small business. It's so hard to buy marketing as a small business owner. And it's gotten worse because everybody's selling a piece of the puzzle now. And now they're coming in with robocalls and, you know, all the other possible ways that they can reach small business. So somebody who said, here's what we're going to do, and here's what it costs, I think was music to their ears. And I felt like if I was going to go out there and talk about that in the world, this is when the internet was just starting to look like a commercially viable place, that I had to kind of give it a brand, more of a brandish, you know, kind of name. And I'd love to tell you that I did all kinds of market research, but do we have time for me to tell you about a 2-minute story on how I came up with the name?
Absolutely.
So, my wife and I went on a vacation. It was the first time we'd gone on a vacation without the kids. I mean, the kids were old enough for us to say, okay, let's just leave them with, you know, somebody who's going to kind of come and be there at night. But, you know, we'll kind of leave them on their own for the most part. They were in high school. And, you know, one of my daughters told 2 friends who told 2 friends who, next thing I know, the next thing we hear anyway, is that the party's, you know, maxes out at about 200 people. And, you know, various things happen at those types of gatherings. One of the attendees thought it'd be really funny to take one of my cars and drive it around the block. And there was somebody doing some work on a neighbor's house, so they thought it'd be really funny to tip over the porta potty. And in doing so, they knocked just a little piece of plastic. You know, the bumpers are just like shielded in all this plastic crap. So they knocked a little piece off there. And it wasn't, you know, so there was no dents or damage or anything. And so my daughter thought, well, to hide the evidence, you know, we'll get something and tape it back on there. Well, so they found a roll of duct tape and they taped it back on there. And probably would still be there today. Maybe wouldn't have been busted, except they left the roll of duct tape square in the middle of the hood of the car. And that was really suspicious looking. So, you know, after we separated them, you know, broke them down individually, got the true story. We, you know, it was one of the point when I was thinking about, you know, what would be a good name for this. And now I had worked with small business owners forever, and I think it's an appropriate name, you know, for what it's like to, you know, grow a small business. But I also thought, boy, if 15, 16-year-olds, you know, see the value of this, then, you know, that's probably a great name. So that's the story, and I'm sticking to it.
Oh, get it? See what you did there?
All the way through, like a real marketer. He really knows. And you know what I like is that, you know, afterwards come people like Mike Michaelwitz with the toilet paper entrepreneur. Yeah. We get all these other, you know, very standard things.
Less apt metaphors. Yeah.
Someone will be the Post-it guy. I don't know. It's always our way. But John was there from 30 years, so that's kind of nutty. I can't imagine you in an ad agency.
You know, duct tape marketing has been translated in about 15 languages, and the title doesn't translate very well. You know, it's because there's not this strange affection for duct tape all over the world like there is here. And so, like the Portuguese is, you know, marketing that is low cost and effective. Just doesn't have the same sound, does it?
Really, no. But I bet it sounds really good in Portuguese. Everything sounds really good in Portuguese.
Right. Sounds like you could order that. The thought I had when you were saying this is, I cannot, when you say, you know, you did a few years in marketing, in advertising before all this, I can't fathom you in that. Like, what kind of advertising were you doing? Was it like this, you know, we're going to stick your crap in the yellow pages? Like what was that?
Well, you know, you have to realize this was
2070, I think is what
you were probably in 3rd grade. So this was like 1984, 83.
I was a teenager, but sure. I probably could still be in 3rd grade, but
speak for yourself.
8th grader.
Exactly. And,
so what was advertising? What was that landscape back then?
So it was, to tell you the truth, this company had a huge foothold in the horticultural industry. So, I mean, this is one of those deals, like I got out of college and needed a job, right? So I've, you know, looked around and they said they'd hire me. So they had a huge foothold in the horticulture industry. So this was back when we printed everything. And so the tree companies and the seed companies and the bulb companies all had these massive catalogs, print catalogs. I mean, that's how they got business. They'd send that catalog out once a year and then wait by the phone. So I'll go totally old school on you here. So this company had a lock on the industry because they had a library of separations of plant species.
Oh, wow.
Raise your hand if you know what a separation is. In the printing world, you took photos, and if you wanted to print them, you had to actually get a special process to get them broken up into 4 pieces of film. And those 4 pieces of film would be stripped in for the CMYK colors. And then the thing would all run through this press, and magically you'd have a picture. So the fact it was very expensive to get a separation of an image. And so the fact that they had this library made them the go-to person. So there you go. A lot of useless old historical printing knowledge there for your listeners.
I thought separation came before divorce. I don't know.
Because you're a lawyer. Cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, the K in black, because for reasons, B can't be used, right? So that's why we had to do CMYK. So, and Leslie says, very familiar. So,
yeah.
All right. So in the continuing with unprecedented ways, that is a not pleasant word.
Unprecedented.
That we do this show. I'm going to pop this up, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to drag Katie back into it.
Katie.
With no warning.
Poor Katie. Maybe she had stuff she was doing. You don't know.
I just looked to make sure there's no finger in the nose. No finger in the nose. We're good. We can go. So,
I do my best.
That's you did your best. My dad had a brief stint working in printing press companies, by the way, with letter setting and everything.
Yeah.
Typesetting and blocking it all down with the pieces.
I feel
of
like
wood
your parents did everything.
They did. My dad was almost always, when I was growing up, running 4 or more jobs at a time. And that's actually one of those things where I decided that, I didn't really want that kind of lifestyle. I really wanted to have like some kind of a career. And then, so of course, I succeeded. Now I have 3 or 4 jobs at a time.
Projectionist, poker dealer.
Yep. Radio DJ, both of them. Everything. My dad learned how to become a computer programmer while he was helping at this state building. So, Katie, anything that came to mind or questions that came to mind where you were sitting there listening to Mr. Words a Day and all that, or anything that just sort of on your head as you're sitting there quietly contemplative?
I mean, those are a couple of heavy questions. Do you want to know the real answer, or do you want the podcast appropriate answer?
Real answer. Totally the real answer.
No, I think that, I really appreciate, John, your approach to like sort of the once a day mantra. And it's something I think that small businesses and entrepreneurs should really get behind because, my business is only about 2.5 years old. And I remember starting it was very daunting and overwhelming. And I think the, sort of that one day at a time or one thing at a time mentality is really what helps you get through that overwhelming anxiety of, I can't do it all at once. And so really breaking it down to one thing at a time is so smart and makes a lot of sense. And we try to do that from a data perspective with our clients because they tend to want to do everything all at once, but you really have to get them to crawl before they can run.
Yeah. Yeah, I talk about it as a practice, because as entrepreneurs, you can establish a morning routine, have a great process, go out the door like all fired up, and then the first 30 minutes, everything falls apart. And if you don't have sort of a mindset place that you can return to, which takes a long time to develop, I think, as a muscle, you get run over, or worse, you focus on the unimportant all day long because that was easier to get done. So
yeah, just fritter away the time with your purple pens.
Yeah,
exactly. Get anything done.
Exactly.
I was thinking about you, Katie, when John was talking about how when he first started his business, he had to have those conversations like, look, this is what I do. It costs this much. Do you want it or do you not? And I was like, oh my God, it's so Katie.
Yep. Yeah.
It shortens the sales cycle, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It does. Yeah.
It's awesome. Get to a fast no.
I've been thinking about that a lot, though, and especially when I talked about that Brooklyn company, that the hotel that changed themselves into a rent the business by the day kind of a place. I feel that there's a few different ways to go after business, and one is kind of that Charlie Green and David Maister trusted advisor, like you're always just kind of haunting your clients and thinking of ways to make them feel better. But then there's the people who have assets and they're just, I've got to move these assets. And if I can't move these assets, then I'm not business. Like, when in horticulture with seeds or whatever, you've got a bunch of beefsteak tomato seeds or you don't, and that kind of a thing. So it's interesting that I think that sort of split in marketing between, are you, especially people who are entrepreneurs, are you selling an existing asset And then are you just working on different ways to kind of make that appealing, or are you selling that relationship kind of a thing? It's interesting how that changes. Just thoughts from anyone on that?
Well, one thing is I've been preaching a bunch of, and I think one of Christian just mentioned this, is, one of the things that this shock to our systems currently has done is helped people think about how they need to narrow their focus and work on, not inventing new things or new markets, but work more closely on innovating the space where they've already got some love. And that's definitely what I've been preaching, at least right now, is how can we go narrower? How can we do more for the people that truly are ideal for, our business, as opposed to going out there and just finding more stuff and getting on more platforms and, doing more things, do less if you want to grow.
I agree with that. And we struggled with that a little bit when we first started, because we were trying to be everything to everyone in order to bring in more business and attract more clients. And we really, within, I would say, the past 18 months, focused in on the things that we do really, really well, and really started to double down on just those things, because it is so tempting. Well, I can do that. Well, I can do that. And you sort of overextend yourself trying to grow your business. And, I've definitely fallen into that trap, but you're so right, John. Like, you really have to narrow it in order to scale and not burn yourself out.
Yeah. And ironically, data is what tells you.
Yes.
The story, right? I mean, what we do with folks in analytics is like, well, let's not start here with all the reports. Let's start here with a couple goals. What do we want people to do? We want them to call us. We want them to fill out a form. Okay, now let's work backwards and figure out what makes that happen. And it's like, oh, now data makes sense.
That's what I love about what Trust Insights does. So I've had the opportunity to see like the punch lists you give people after a project ends. It's not like, well, we found a bunch of stuff wrong, so like good luck with everything. If you want to fix it, that's a new contract. But you give them a list. You're like, here's all the things you need to fix, and here's how you do it. And like, I don't know what percentage of the time. I'm sure some healthy percentage of the time they're like, can you just do it? But if they wanted to, they could take that list and do it.
A decent amount of time, they definitely want additional support, but you're absolutely right. So what we do is we'll do these infrastructure audits that take, if we do it full on for a couple of days, we'll just go through everything, and we'll put together a spreadsheet of here's everything we found. But then what we'll also do is try to prioritize it and give them some sense of how big the task is, so that they're not trying to do everything on the list at once. But if we'll sort of tell them, if you can do just the highest priority things, you'll be in really, really good shape. And all of the rest of the stuff is nice to have. And trying to get them into that mindset that you don't have to do everything all at once. If you just do these couple of things and tweaks and hit these buttons, you would be in such better shape than you are now. And I realize that I always talk a lot with my hands. I can't help it. I have little fidget things, but they don't help.
You should
putting them down, and I still have to talk with my hands.
Organize your report by day.
There you go.
It's like, here's the thing you can do tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about the thing with your hands. I do the same. And then more so because of shooting so much video, I try to keep it in frame. So it looks even weirder because I'm not worrying about going off the screen. I just keep it right in here.
T-Rex movements.
T-Rex, yeah. I also think of Will Ferrell in Talladega Nights, where he's on that interview. And he's like, I don't know what to do with my hands. That's me in half of these things, but
I'm always fidgeting with something. This is a Barbary pencil. It's like a bar review class that I took 20 years ago, and I still have the pencil. That's how much we don't use pencils, you guys.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, you were talking about the office supply rant at the very beginning of this, and 25 years ago, I had we needed some office supplies, and so one of the things I put on the list that somebody was going to go acquire was paper clips. Remember those? And she thought a case of paper clips sounded right, and that was, by the way, 24 big boxes of paper clips, and they're still kicking around my office today.
That's like if you're going to pick a bunch of locks or something.
I mean, it
like Katie could probably use that.
It cost like $4, for the case, but crazy.
I'm just laughing, also thinking about that. Sounds like everyone's first trip to Costco when you buy like the 85-pound mustard.
Oh, you get so excited. You're like, I need all the things.
I can't believe you can get this much French's mustard, and 7 years later.
I don't use wooden pencils either, Leslie. I don't use them clearly.
There's not even a
I just
point.
keep them. There's not.
You know where wooden pencils are awesome though? I still use, as Chris mentioned, I have a lot of hobbies. I build furniture, and as a carpenter, wooden pencils are absolutely essential.
For marks and stuff, sure.
Just for marks, and then they sand off a lot easier than other stuff.
But aren't those like those are like a heavier duty type of
and
lead
they're
or
flat,
something,
so they don't roll off your desk. Yeah,
yeah, something like that. And then I have one that also says like "Stay gold, mother ever," and I keep that handy as well. Out of frame ideally, normally, because it doesn't say ever.
I'm not showing you my fidget toys. I will say, Christian Adams sent a question. This might actually smush this into bugs. Watch. Okay. John or others, how do you overcome objections from business owners and CEOs who are presented with analytics, but let ego get in the way? This is how we've always done things. I'm going to start with Katie on this one and then to John.
So we get this a lot, and it's a very, very common issue where the marketing team is trying to make change and then they bring it sort of up the chain and someone says, I don't care what the data says, I want to do it this way. And so that's why one of the things that we do at Trust Insights is we're not just about the data. We focus a lot on the people and change management. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not an overnight thing, and change management is really difficult to manage the change. And so you have to start with baby steps and showing them, small incremental wins. You can't sort of do everything all at once. And so if you're trying to use data to change the opinion, you may end up having to run things in parallel for a while to almost do an A/B test. And once you can demonstrate by using data, you get these results versus by doing what we've always done, we get these results. Showing things like we were able to bring in more money tends to move change management along a lot faster.
We're rolling out. So John, you get the last word on that question.
Well, part of the challenge was my history of clients is, much smaller. Change management sounds like something the mechanic does to the trucks for them, I think. So for a lot of, to tell you the truth, I don't have the same issue that Katie has a lot of times, because for a lot of the folks we work with, they've never used data to do anything. It's all been their gut. It's all been, this is how we've always done it. But then in some ways to actually say, well, look, you wanted to cancel your AdWords, but 37% conversion to what you want them to do is happening through your AdWords, and they're like, oh crap, we can't do that. So I mean, it's unfair, to compare. But I think with a lot of the folks that I've worked with over the years, data just like for the first time opens their eyes, and quite often we can actually cut their marketing budget with data.
I've heard them explain data away. They'll be like, yeah, but that was, this particular thing, or this was maybe broken, or, they always have some reason why it doesn't look the way that it should in their estimation.
Yeah.
Look.
Yeah. People are always going to do what they want to do. But I feel like my job as a consultant is to get up in their face, if they're making the wrong decision.
I know you're so aggressive, John. I was going to say.
I will swat them down.
You make Katie look demure.
It's not an easy thing to do, so congratulations.
Oh my gosh, I'm letting this circus go. What a day, what a show. So this was different. So I need everybody's feedback. I really need to hear what you think about this format of the show, because we're going to at least do it this week. I liked it. But listen, thank you everybody for being part of this. Thank you, Katie Robbert from Trust Insights. Thank you, John Jantsch from Duct Tape Marketing. So cool. Carrie, as always, thank you for being part of this. Thanks for helping make everything all that much better.
I'm the plucky comic relief, that's all.
The other button pusher, because I noticed at one point you and I were both pushing them at the same time.
I know, stop it.
I know, I can't help it. I don't know what to do with my hands. Katie said it. All right. We're hitting it. So, as everyone knows, this show ends kind of differently than every other show ever. I'm just going to hit this button and look it up.